Hi, I'm Katie Parks, the new Southbrook Kids Director. You may have seen me hosting in 3rd through 5th, or even working at the welcome counter, or maybe just chasing my 3 kids around the hallways. But nevertheless, I'm now a part of Southbrook and couldn't be more excited. If you haven't heard, Southbrook Kids will be back on November 15th. And this gives your kids a chance to learn together, as well as our parents some time to attend the services. Now, please know, safety is our first priority. We are requiring that all volunteers and staff members wear masks. We are also temperature checking our volunteers, staff members, as well as our kids attending the services. Now, if you do feel comfortable serving, we would absolutely love to have you on our team. If you're interested or just want to learn more, please visit southbrook.org/serve. And thank you. We'll see you on November 15th.
Hello, church. We are so excited that you have chosen to give us the time together to share in part 2 of a series we're doing called Movement Inc. You say, Movement Inc. Why are we doing Movement Inc? Isn't incorporated kind of a negative word in culture today? Well, we're going to tell you why we chose to call it Movement Inc. And in our branding of this series, join the Movement Inc. Very excited. I love this series. I know I say that with every series, but I really believe it. This is so rich as we're walking through the 7 parables of Jesus in Matthew 13. Now, we want you to be aware of important data points relevant to our church, push pay, and making sure that you're doing your part to invest yourself into the movement of God on earth called the church, and that also that you are doing your part to say, where can I serve? And right now, for example, Southbrook serves. You can go to southbrookcitylights.org and get the information on how you can either be a shopper or a deliverer of food to those who are in need in our area, Dayton, Ohio. Take a look at this video. This is a really cool story of Jacob and Hannah and their journey of moving with the movement of Christ in His local church.
Yeah, we met in high school.
We technically met one time in 8th grade when I shadowed a friend at his school.
Yep.
Was it love at first sight?
No, it was not.
I totally friend-zoned him. At first, we were friends for a while, so I just really liked him as a person in general. He was really kind.
And she was always a hard worker and always helping out other people. And that's what I really liked. We were pretty much just like making all these plans for the future and like what our future is going to be like. Went and my mom helped me pick out a ring, and I decided that summer I was like, I'm gonna do it. And her mom has been pressuring me ever since.
The first day, our first date, literally.
We were all just looking for like seashells on the beach, and it was right when like sunset. And so I kind of waited for the sun to start setting, and then I just got on one knee and asked her to marry me.
You said yes?
I did.
Yep.
And so then we started looking at venues. We looked at a couple around the area, but a lot of them were just out of budget, and there was just no way that we would be able to make them work. And there really wasn't any that we were like head over heels with, in love with. So we came to Reverie, and we really liked the space. But we also really liked the people. It was amazing, and we were able to work with Saul and Abby. They were just accommodating in every way. We had just kind of talked about how we wanted to check the church out too, so we came on a Sunday and we both just...
I think we both felt like it felt genuine.
Even though she's not biologically ours, people don't really know that or notice it right off the bat. So when we walk into a church and you see that, you know, a really young couple isn't married and has a child, sometimes you get a judgmental vibe.
It was nice just to be accepted all around.
Yeah. And so then we both started volunteering So I did the children's ministry, Southport Kids, and he did guest services for a while. Even though we're just starting our journey, we feel like we already have connections with so many people here. Just having that church support for us and for Paige, it's been amazing.
I love that story. I got involved in church work because I wanted people to experience what I've experienced, and just the thrill of being a part of something that's leading people to this amazing, amazing good news of Jesus Christ that we want our whole world to know about. And so we're in a weird year, right? We are in the strangest of years. And I actually had someone ask me this week, why are we doing this series right now? It's because our church is really restarting. We are reigniting our movement of bringing heaven to earth called Southbrook. We're the outpost of a heaven to earth movement. And I was thinking the other day how weird this year is. And many of you who are golfers will know that the Masters golf tournament is usually held in April when the azaleas are blooming in Augusta, Georgia, and it's spring. And this year, because of COVID-19, it got moved to November. And I was thinking this week, there very well might be Christmas commercials during the Masters. How wacky can this year be? But what this year has done for me, as it's done for many of you, is to know that the most important movement happening on earth is not the Republican movement and it's not the Democratic movement. The most important decision that we're going to make this week is not the decision as to who is the President of the United States. Because for many of us, we know our hope is not in the President of the United States. Our hope is in Jesus Christ, and He said, "My kingdom is not of this world." The point of origination in my kingdom is not Washington, D.C. It's not Columbus, Ohio. My kingdom comes from heaven, and I'm here on a mission to bring it to earth. And so in Matthew 13, He tells these 7 stories. Here is story number 2, Matthew 13:24. He told them another parable. Remember, a parable is an earthly story sat next to a heavenly truth so that you get the heavenly truth. The light bulb goes off. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. Now remember, Jesus was in an agricultural society, so He used a lot of agricultural imagery. But while everyone was sleeping, His enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. The word for weeds is also called darnel. Darnel looks just like wheat when it's in its early stages. They look very similar. You almost cannot tell them apart. Well, when the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the darnel come from? The weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. That's not an unusual circumstance in that culture. Sowing bad seed into someone's field. And the servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, because while you're pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Now this is really interesting because that would literally happen, that because you couldn't tell them apart, if you tried to solve the problem and the dilemma in and of yourself, you would create more of a problem. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I'll tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. So they would pull out, they would harvest the fields, and then there would be workers who would separate the wheat from the weeds. And then he left the crowd and went into the house. And so when they got in there later, verse 36, his disciples came to him, that word is really key, his apprentices, his students, and they said, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. And he answered, the one who sowed the good seed is the Messiah, the Son of Man. That was from Ezekiel's self-designation, the servant of mankind. And the field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The word for people is often translated subjects of the kingdom. People who have willingly chosen to bring their life under the rule of this king in his kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one, subjects of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil, the adversary, Satan, the evil one. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. So look, right there, Jesus Christ affirms the reality of an evil force in the world, an evil persona in the world, and he affirms the reality of creatures called angels, spiritual beings who are messengers of Christ, of God. And then he says, verse 40, as the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The consummation of history. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace. This was an imagery of in that culture, they would throw away the darnel, throw away the weeds, throw away the thistles into a fire, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That is an idiom for regret. We could spend this whole message talking about that idiom right there. It was a favorite idiom of Jesus. You ever heard someone go, oh? Have you ever done that yourself? Go, oh, you gnash your teeth. You were, oh, I missed that opportunity. And he says, this is what embodies those who subjected themselves not to God's rule, but to the evil one's direction. The evil one's compass is regret. And the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears, let them hear. In other words, if there is a part of you that can grasp this, then make sure you get it. Biblical scholar and commentator William Barclay once called this perhaps the most practical of all of Jesus' parables. It's not the most famous. It's not the most read. It's not the most taught. It's not in the league of the Good Samaritan or the prodigal son or the parable of the talents. But he said the most practical. Why? It's because it gets to the brass tacks, to where the rubber meets the road of life and eternity and reality. That the reason your life is hard is that there is an evil one always trying to sow evil reality into your life and mine. That there is a force that is against the reality of God's kingdom on the earth. God's rule in your life is opposed all the time. And that there's going to be a final accountability to life. The meaning of life is not that it ends. The meaning of life is that at the end, we are held accountable for how we stewarded our lives. So there's so much I could talk about this. There's so much in here. You could do a series on this parable alone. But what I want to do is I want to talk through, in this Movement Inc. modality we're in, How do we know who's a part of the Jesus movement called Southbrook? How do we know who the subjects of the kingdom are, who the subjects of the evil one are? Well, first of all, we don't have to know because God knows. And secondly, we're really not that interested in knowing who's in or out, except on the basis of how Jesus looked at it. And that's what I want to talk about. On this weekend before election, we're really big into binary, aren't we? We're really big into, you may have even read that parable and you just know the subjects of the evil one are those Republicans or those Democrats. That's who the thistles and the thorns are. If we could just weed them out of our culture, then America would be great. And that's not what Jesus is about. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. Our first loyalty is to Christ's kingdom, not the American kingdom. Or if you're listening to this in another country, that country's respective kingdom. So how do we look at this? Well, about 2 years ago, I introduced this concept from a professor by the name of Paul Hibert. And he talked about there are two options to determine an object as being in or out. One is through the idea of a bounded set, and the other is through the idea of a centered set. Now, in a bounded set, the manner by which you decide whether something is in or out is by a clear declaration of the boundary. A clear declaration of the boundary. So look to this picture to my left, and you looking at a square right now. That is a very definitive definition and declaration. A square is a square. It is clear, it is static. Notice that. A bounded set is clear and it is static. In other words, it's very clear that that is not a circle, that is not a triangle. Very clear. 4 defined angles, 4 defined sides. And it's static. It's not going to change in the sense that you cannot make a square more circly. You cannot make a square more triangular. It is very clear. It is very static. And you know what's in the set of squares by that definition of those 4 sides and those 4 angles. So, that's one way to look at something. We love bounded sets as a humanity because we like to know who's in our club and who is out. That's why this parable is so critical, is because human beings just love to know, be able to organize people in little categories. There's another way. We think this is the Jesus way. And this is why our vision for how we re-engage with our culture in this new world is this way. And it's a centered set. And in a centered set, objects in the set that would be related to our church, you and me, are defined by their relationship to the center. Membership in the centered set is dynamic, not static. Because what matters in the centered set is movement. What matters in the centered set is movement. A centered set is neither vague nor subjective. In other words, it is very clear based on what I'm doing and the decisions I'm making that I am moving toward the center of this set. I'll give an example this way. So I had a guy come up to me a while back and he said, he hadn't seen me in years. He goes, wow, you're getting a lot grayer there, Charlie. And I said, yep, this is what working one day a week as a pastoral do to you. And I wasn't born with gray hair. I was born with brown hair. I am moving toward the center of the centered set of gray-haired people. If you look at Hollywood actresses, Glenn Close, Jamie Lee Curtis, they rock the gray-haired look, right? They don't hide it. They're not painting their hair. They rock the gray-haired look. And every other actress in Hollywood pretty much is not in that set. They're not a part of the gray-haired set. Now, I don't know how many gray hairs you have to be considered a part of the gray-haired set. It really doesn't matter. Only God knows. He has the hairs of our head numbered. But we know whether or not we're moving toward the gray-haired set, right? We know that. That's not vague. It is not utterly subjective, because we know whether or not we are accumulating more gray hairs. Here's another example. Bald-headed people. Now, at the center of bald heads would be people like Telly Savalas and Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson and Mr. Clean. They are right at the center of the bald head set. My granddaughter, Frankie, she is really close to the center of that right now, but she is going to gradually move out of that. Even every week as we see her, she's moving out of the center of the set of bald-headed people because she's growing more hair. There will be a day when she will no longer be a part of the bald-headed set because she's grown out of it. You may be 20 and you were born with full hair, but you're moving out of that and into closer to the center of the bald-headed set. How many hairs does it take to be a part of the bald-headed set? I don't know, but it's not subjective or vague as to whether or not you're moving toward the center of the bald-headed set, right? You see, a centered set is defined in relation to the center as opposed to the boundary. If we think of Christianity as a bounded set, what will we focus on? We will focus on the boundary. If we say it is this, it is defined, you're either in or you are out, we will begin to focus on what makes people out and what makes people in. We believe the New Testament presents the vision of a community, look at this word, of disciples, apprentices, students. That's what that is. Jesus called every one of us to be a student, a learner of His life that looks very much like a centered set rather than a bounded set. Now, that doesn't mean that to be a part of the kingdom and the movement of Christ is a vague, subjective deal. I mean, there's no definition. No, there's definition. There are things Christ's followers do that makes it very clear that they are moving toward the center, but their life is not static. Their life is not static. So if we were to show it, here's the picture we would show it. A bounded set in regards to faith looks like the circle that you're looking at on the left. Very definitive who's outside that circle and who's inside that circle. Now, when we start focusing and we see the kingdom of God as a bounded set, what we start doing is focusing on those behaviors and actions that are very clearly of the set or not of the set. So it's harder to really understand someone's attitude toward poverty, but it's not hard to understand someone's attitude toward sexuality. So what do we tend to do? We tend to look at those things like sexuality that make people clearly not of this set. They're clearly not of this set. And yet we tend not to look at those things that are less obvious, like one's attitude toward the poor, to the marginalized, to those who need help in life. But what if, on that circle on the right, we don't see that hard definition, but as you can see, even in our branding of this series, it's about the arrows moving toward the center. And the center is Christ. The center is Christ. That Christ defines and incarnates life in our sphere of community, and He makes that life available to all who want it. So I am moving toward this. My life is a journey. You are the light and the compass of my life. It's not about where I stand, static. I was confirmed when I was in 8th grade. I was baptized when I was 8 days old. I was baptized when I was 12 years old. I took communion. I said the sinner's prayer. I confirmed the Nicene Creed. All those things that are stat. Doesn't matter how you live after that, because you're in now. That's a bounded set. Christ didn't call a community that way. He called, this is what is called the kingdom of God. And that is those who would say, I am moving toward making Jesus Christ more and more the center of my reality. In the words of Colossians, He is over all, through all, and in all. I am moving toward bringing, as you'll see in this series, my minutes, my mojo, and my money into a coalescing of reality that makes me an agency of bringing up there, down here. If Christianity is a bounded set, then we will want to be very clear about what the necessary and required conditions are to get people inside. This is what Dallas Willard called barcode Christianity. All that matters is you get them saved. It doesn't matter how they live after that, just get them saved. Get them dunked. Get them to say the sinner's prayer. That's a bounded set. And once they're in, any further progress is optional. That's why many of you are listening to this and you see being a disciple as optional. You know where that came from? That came from a bounded set methodology and theology. That all that matters is I'm covered by the eternal fire insurance. I'm in. I said that prayer. I attended church. I clocked in. Whatever. And this is why there are Christians who go to church on Sunday and live like hell on Monday. It comes from a bounded set theology. If Christianity is a bounded set, we will tend to focus on those issues that differentiate who is in and who is out, rather than on those issues that were central to Jesus' primary concern. And if we're centered around a Christ-centered set, what matters most is the posture and direction of our lives. We're not worried about who is us and who is them. This is why this takes away I got to figure out who's Democrat and who's Republican, who's gay and who's straight, who's left and who's right. I'm not on that committee, and neither are you. A Christ-centered set approach is a reminder that following Christ is not a static religious identity, but a dynamic calling that constantly renews us, constantly challenges us. I want to put it to you straight. I'm on a journey. In the words of the Apostle Paul, not that I have already achieved all this, he said, but forgetting what is behind, pressing toward what is ahead, I press on to achieve the goal of the high calling of God that is in Christ Jesus. I want to ask you, is this a movement you want to join? Is this a movement you want to join? I want to strongly recommend that you stay on for the questions that are going to follow. Hit the pause button on each one and answer these as we move our church into a decision to join the movement. Now, you may have been a part of Southbrook for a long time, so much so that you almost see it now as your bounded set. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a movement that is not static, that is going toward the center. Before you get to those questions, there's a song. We've sang it many times at our church. Lord, be my light, guiding my direction. Be the compass of my soul. You've led me this far, and you're going to lead me all the way home. I love that. Because I'm not what I ought to be. I'm not what I'm going to be, but I'm not what I was. I'm not where I ought to be. I'm not where I'm going to be. I'm not where I was. I am moving. And so are we. Would you consider, with all the stakes of eternity before us, that there is an evil one? I don't have to look to Republicans or Democrats to find my villain. There is an evil one out to destroy my life, my children, my grandchildren, my friends, my brothers and sisters. The stakes are so high. I want to give everything I can, my minutes, my mojo, my money, to making sure that my life is leveraged to bring up there, down here. Will you join the movement?
My roadmap fails, and my way feels like the shifting sand. I will release the wheel and take a backseat to your perfect plan. Lord, be my light, guiding my direction. Lord, be the compass of my soul. My confidence is found when I remember that you led me this far and you lead me all the way home. You lead me all the way home. Though the mountain's high, I won't cower in the shadowlands, 'cause soon the sun will rise, and I will walk into your promised land. Lord, be my light, guiding my direction. Lord, be the compass of my soul. My confidence is found when I remember that you led me this far and you lead me all the way home. You lead me all the way home. Oh, I believe that you're with me even though I try to walk alone. So I will follow you. Oh, anywhere you go, I'm found in you, my own.
Oh, I believe that you're with me even though I try to walk alone. So I will follow you. Oh, anywhere you go, I'm found in you, my home.
Lord, be my light, guiding my direction.